Yes, and we're COMP3025, and it's week 5, lesson 5, and we're talking about, or it's part 1, and we're talking about Apple a little bit with layouts. And I'm not sure, did I put this PowerPoint online yet? You should have it online. Right? I've got the latest one we can follow. And the latest one we're going to follow is, of course, all around, let me just go back into here. All around our GUI, and we did welcome app last week. This time we're going to do a tip calculator. Yeah? You got a tip calculator? Thank you. So we're handling the tip calculator this time. And the tip calculator basically is going to do a couple more things. We're going to talk a little bit more about Swift again, right? It's going to be built in, but you're going to see it when we do our when we do some of our code. And when you look at it, when you look at the code for our tip calculator, you're going to say, that makes no sense. Why are we doing this? Why are we putting the the code like this? Why are we building it this way? Isn't there another way to do it? And the answer is probably going to be yes, there is always another way, right? We're going to be talking about outlets and actions and what the two things are. And those are the two things that are going to be helping us build interactivity with our applications. Okay? So let's get into that. If we look at the tip calculator, we have something that looks like this. And by the way, if you were going to do the Android version of this book, it's the exact same tip calculator. Now, if you took a look at the Java for Android, and you took a look at the iOS, the Swift for iOS, you're going to shake your head, right? Actually, if anything, the Android piece is a lot easier, more straightforward than this piece. But however, one of the advantages that we do here with iOS is that we're going to be using our viewport size. Right, we're going to use almost like a flexible viewport size. So when we have an iPad, or like a universal app, an iPad or an iPhone or whatever, it's good. Whereas for Android, it doesn't quite work the same way. There are some issues when you do things like this in Android. There's extra little layouts and that you have to kind of implement. Where here, it's kind of part of the whole deal. And we'll talk about what that means in a second. So without going into this PowerPoint, because it's all kinds, it's about 120 slides I put together for this one, and I want to go through some of them. We're going to hit them because there's going to be a little bit of a thing to do today, like last week, right? Since we need that 5%, right? We need to. Up the slides for us? You only have 4, not 5. I don't have 5? Nope. What the hell? Oh, how remiss of me, right? It's terrible. Okay. How could I made the slides, but I didn't put them up. I don't understand. And by the way, I have to make these slides, like I said, because unfortunately, what ends up happening is if I don't make these slides, then there's nothing. Because Deedle doesn't supply these things right now because, of course, there is this book is so new, right? So, lesson 5.
Are we following a specific Deedle book?
Yes, we are. It's called, I'll show it to you again in a second.
Isn't that that Swift thing?
It is. I'll show it to you, but you can actually download it and buy it. So,
I thought that was an Apple book.
no. Yeah.
It is an Apple book, but it is by Deedle and Deedle.
They're all. It's the Deedle book. Actually, it's pretty comprehensive. I would say it's a little bit advanced for some of the things they do, but then Deedle always does it more in an advanced way, right? So, you have to kind of get what you can with them, and we don't have to go through every chapter of the book. I think we need to hit the main pieces. And then move on to the more exciting parts about making your own interface. So, okay, it should be up now under tip calculator. Yeah? You got it?
We got it.
Yay. Okay, so now that the tip calculator is up, for those of you who don't have the book, again, I'll put it up. Even though I've got it here in iBooks, right? It's called iOS 8. Come on, iBooks. iOS 8 for Programmers and an App-Driven Approach by Deedle and Deedle. So it's the exact same thing that I'm following this book. And again, there is no resources for instructors at this point because it's so new that I'm making them myself. Okay, so that's why there's about 120 slides in this one. They probably wouldn't have only come up with like 20 slides. But there's a lot of them for this one. Okay, and why? Because when we look at this, when we look at the stuff that we're talking about with Interface Builder and all that kind of stuff, what we want to try and do here is, and this is part of your exercise, is I want you to build your tip calculator, right? And then afterwards today for your assignment, your little in-house assignment that we're going to do for the second half, after we try this out, is I want you to build your own little calculator, but it's not going to calculate tips. Okay, we're going to talk about some other things it's going to calculate in the second half. Okay. But let's leave this alone for a second and explore the world of how do we make an IB action and an IB outlet, and what those two things bloody thing. What are they things anyway? All right. So first we're going to come up and make our own our new little application here. As soon as Xcode kicks off, come on Xcode. One day, hey, there it is. Okay, I want to make an application. I want to start with this single view application. Single view applications. We'll do the same thing that we did last time. Are you with me? All right. Please follow along, because if you don't, then you will, when it comes to doing your own little thing later on, it's going to be more challenging. I'll click next. It's going to ask me, hey Tom, what's your product name? And I'm going to put in something like my, I don't know, we'll call it first demo for today. First demo. All right. And again, I'm going to make a universal app this time, not an iPhone app. There's 3 different options: iPhone, iPad, and universal. Let's make it universal. We'll use Swift, and you can put on your identifier for your company, whatever you decide to make it, and so on. So you have to use this bundle identifier, this reverse domain methodology that we use here. Are we cool with this part? Next. Okay, once we do that, it's going to tell us where to save it. I'm going to put it on my desktop, and I'm going to create my my new project. One of the things we did last time was, remember, we had this idea of adding everything, like landscape left, landscape right. But for a calculator, for our simple calculator, let's not include landscape left and landscape right. And that's one thing that it's going to ask you in the detail book to do. So let's take these off. We're going to exclude those options, right? That's one thing we want to try and do. Apps and icons and all these other things, let's leave as is. And if you look on the right-hand side, again, we have our first demo. That's what it says. And inside of our main storyboard right now, if you notice, there's this little arrow that goes in here. And this little arrow tells us that this first element right here, this first storyboard, and by the way, if you want to change the size of your storyboard, you can right-click somewhere outside of the storyboard and over here, right-click, and let's zoom to 50%. Right? Which will make it so that we can see our storyboard better. Can I get someone to hit the lights so we can get some better clarity? Thank you. All right, so here's our storyboard. And if you notice, you guys can see it there. Yes, that's better. You can see that my storyboard is now at 50%. If I go back, I'm going to go to 100%. And I want to work in 100%, but sometimes when I see more than one storyboard, especially if I have a segue from one storyboard to the other, that's what it's called, segue, then I want to be able to see my storyboard if I have multiple pages like this kind of magnification, right? Or less, right? So let's go back to 100. Okay, so again, we talked about this. Again, from a controls perspective, just to make it larger than life, we can make it kind of, we can increase or take away items of the inside of our IDE here, right? And now I want to drag and drop a couple of items. The one first thing I want to drag in is maybe some kind of label again, because we've done this label before. So here we go, we're going to drag in this label, all right, and it doesn't matter where we put it. Let's just center it so that it's on the top left corner. And if you notice, there's a couple of issues here. This battery here is indicating that this is where my the bar is going to be in my phone, right? So I would normally have a battery in the top portion of my phone, and so you want to do it so that it doesn't hang out above this area. That means this will be inside. This will be inside the same level where my battery is. I don't want that, right? And it'll tell you, if you see that there's a little blue line that tells you that it should be on the bottom of this thing, somewhere down here, right? If you follow the guidelines, Apple's guidelines basically tell you this is the safe place to put this label, right? So I'll leave it here, right? I can change the name of the label by choosing these icons here on the right-hand side. So if you look at this one right here, this is the properties icon, right? If you hover over it, it says my attributes inspector. My attributes inspector will allow me to change the name of my label, right? My name of my label, I can make it to whatever I want. Like for example, hello. Here's my hello label, right? And it'll actually change, when I click away, it'll change the name that it has here. If you notice from a text perspective, it says plain text. I can also choose attributed text, which allows me to change, like we did last time. I can change the font and so on for my text if I want to. Here, I can leave it the way it is and as is. If you notice, it's the default behavior right now that I have is enabled behavior. or highlighted behavior. I can also disable it so that you can't access the text. I won't be able to highlight the text or do anything with it. Let's leave it as enabled for now. Right? Here's my enabled text. Good, good, good. Okay, now I need a button because I think we need to do some buttons here. So I'm going to drag a button into the schema, right? And I'm going to put my button on the left-hand side as well. Why not? Just next to somewhere in the middle of your page here, as an example. And if you notice, I've got my button here, my hello here, and my button. I'm going to say click me on the button. Why not? This is the thing to say. Click me, right? And of course, it changes my button text, but I've got to make it so that I increase the size of my button text so that it fits in. Otherwise, what you're going to have is something that's not readable. Now, for those of you who have the ability to modify your or run your program, if you do run it at this time, there could be some issues. And one of the problems that it might have is that the layout itself, there's no constraints to any of this information here. And if you look down here, from it says size any. Right here at the bottom of your screen. See that? This is the size class that we're targeting. And if you notice, the size class right now is this big square, right? So let's say I didn't want to target this size class. I only wanted to target iPhone. I could simply reduce the size of this square to here. And so too would my storyboard change size to meet that type of design. But right now, let's just leave it to any instead of compact width, which is going to be here. Back to this again. Okay, so from a size class perspective, that's one thing. The one thing that we also should do is when I click on, there's a couple of little inspectors down here. I can use this for alignment where I can specify one of these things to align to one side or another, and I can add a constraint there. I can do a manual constraint. I can also use this one, which actually tells me that I can create constraints between items. That's what this inspector here does. And down here, though, which is probably what I want to do, I can, if I click away from the text, and if I click this bottom button here, it says, hey, reset to suggested constraints, which I recommend that you always use, which automatically puts in some constraints that Apple kind of gives us right away. Reset to recommended constraints. If I was to run this thing for an iPhone 6, and I apologize again, as I did in the beginning, for people who cannot run this thing right now. But if you are able to run it, and if I click on this thing, you'll notice that I get my button one day. There's my simulator. My simulator comes up. I have my hello, and I have some attributes that make it look like a button. Right now, it doesn't do anything. Okay, cool. Let us stop, debugging for a second. I need this space over here. This is the next piece that I want. I need this space to disappear, so I'm going to get rid of it by clicking it away. And I also have right now, if you notice, I'm hovering over this area that says shows the standard editor, because this is what I'm showing right now. I also want to show the assistant editor, which is the next little circle thing next to it. Do you see that? Right here. If I click that, I get an instant view of my view controller where everything happens. This view controller right here is where all my code gets connected. Stop me if I'm going too fast. Okay. So here's my view controller, and now I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to reduce my size to 50% because I want to be able to fit within my view controller for a second. Actually, if anything, just to make it so we can see it on screen, I'll go back to 100%, but just get rid of that side. There we go. You guys can see it like I can see it? Yeah? Okay, so I've got my click me, and I want to create this event handler. So how would I do that? Well, first, I've got to control click. I'm going to control click. When I click on my object, this button, and it's going to create a new event handler. It's called an action, an IB action. Now, I can put it anywhere I want, all right? And we're going to talk about what view did load means and what did receive memory warnings means. Those are just different default functions, default method calls that happen when we declare this view controller method, okay? But so let's just control click and drag. And if you see, I get this little funny line here. You see what I'm doing? Control click and drag. And I can put it wherever I want, here, or here, anywhere inside my code. Remember I talked about this in the first day, where we wire up, literally wire up our control. I let go. It gives me this option to say, what kind of connection do you want to make, Tom? Do you want to make an outlet, or do you want to make an action? If I want my button, by the way, you can make it do both, right? An outlet and an action. But for now, we just want to make my button be an action, right? So I'm going to change up here where the connection type, I'm going to change that to action. And if you notice, the event type is touch up inside. That's the Apple way of saying you're clicking inside the button. Okay, that's what it means, touch up inside. touch me up inside, baby. Touch up inside. Remember that one, and you'll always remember that it means touch me inside the button, okay? All right, that's Apple's nice way of saying it. And of course, if you notice, my argument is sender, which means this is the argument that I go. I'm going to kind of, I can also, at this point, name my button handler, okay? So my IB action, I'm going to call this my click me button, right? Action, that's what this is. And I'm going to kind of enter it in here. And if you notice, when I do that, it creates this new method. And methods in, of course, in Swift, right? Methods in Swift have this func keyword here, right? It's of type IB action. That's my type that I'm creating here. So click me button, right? Click me button. And I've connected now my button to my view controller object, even though my storyboard shows my button. Unless I physically wire it to my view controller object, you cannot mess with it. It will not give you any kind of events. It will not listen for it, okay? So that's the first piece we need to do. We need to wire up our button by controlling click it and passing it into our view controller object, okay? That's the first thing. Okay, cool. I can't modify my hello because I want this hello thing to change, right? But in order for me to do that, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna control click from my hello into the top here, into the top, just underneath my class declaration here. I'm going to just control click, and this time it's going to become an outlet, and I'm going to call this hello label outlet. You can call it whatever you like. Again, the default type is UI label, all right, and that's the one I'm going to use. And if you notice, the storage type is weak. We're going to talk about that later on. You could also make it strong, but for now, let's make it weak and click connect. What does this do? Well, it gives me a connection to my hello label. That means I can access my hello label outlet. That's what it is, right? I could have simply just called this hello label, right? But that's what it does. So I've got these two things. And if you notice, if I hover over these little things in the sidebar here, right? I have this plus button that shows me I have a connection with my hello label. And here I have a connection with my button. Yeah? Are you with me? Okay, cool. But now I want to do something. So when I click my button, right? When I click my button, this is my event handler, right? I'm going to write it. What do I want to do? I want to access the hello label. So here's my hello. I'm going to start typing hello label outlet dot, and I can do a bunch of different things here, right? So I can say, well, I want to do something with the text, right? So maybe can I just do text? Would that be enough? Could it be that I can say goodbye, right? Would that be enough to do that control? If you notice, there's no semicolons because, hey, just to say, just like Simon Allardyce there, no semicolons. Because basically this will do it. Is this enough? Can I do my text and without do it? Let's try this out and run it. Of course, you guys who can't run it, I apologize in advance again. But for me, let's try this out and see if it works. Click me, and yes, it does. But you know what happens is because my goodbye is larger than the length, the size of my label, I have to resize my label to accept that input. Let's try this again. So I'm going to kind of do one of these. Make it, oh look, and I get this yellow bar. Yellow lines, if you see yellow lines in your, when you do your layout, it's bad. Do not let yellow lines sit in your layout. Actually, it'll give you a little warning up here on the top. You want to correct that by going back down here to this little, what looks like a triangle, right? And I want to change this again to reset to suggested constraints. And when I do that, boom, it becomes blue lines and I'm good to go. Okay? I need warnings that the constraints and that we've put in place that basically create a relationship between objects. It doesn't understand because we've changed the size of my label. Now the constraints have to change as well, and this is why we have to put them in there. And when I click play here again, I should be able to go in here and click me so I can, it's not quite wide enough yet. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make it a little larger, and then of course I get this orange area here, right, for my label, which I'm going to have to fix with this button. And then when I've done that, now I can run it again, which means it's going to stop debugging and run it. And when I do this again, now I click me and there's my goodbye, right? I need the space for the goodbye to come into play. Play with it, guys. I'm going to give you 10 minutes. Play with it around, drop in some other things, try and make a connection and intuit, because you guys have done UIs before, intuit what you can do with an IB action, which is your event handler, and an IB outlet, which is your, the connections you need. Remember, the outlets are references to the objects that you want to send things to, right? They go out from your view controller object, and the action comes into your view controller object as an event handler or listener.
What's
Okay?
IB stand for?
IB stands for Interface Builder, which is what it used to be called. There used to be two objects, Xcode and Interface Builder used to be two separate applications, and now, of course, they smashed them together in Xcode 6. Actually, Xcode 5, way back in the day, or even Xcode 4, if I'm not wrong. Okay, you guys go ahead. Take 10 minutes. I'm going to pause this movie, drag and drop to your heart's content, and put in some IB actions and IB outlets.